Now have two gentlemen joining us. Rory, there's Freddie behind me there. These two fellows have come from afar. Am I correct?
Not too far. Yeah.
Not too far? New York. And both of them representing Corlytics. Corlytics is one of our member firms, the Canadian Regulatory Tech Association. We have both Canadian and international member firms that are part of our community. They're doing business here in Canada and other jurisdictions as well. This is one of the leading global RegTech companies, headquartered in Dublin, trusted by, I think I read 40% roughly of the top 50 FIs globally. They certainly have clients here in Canada. I'm familiar with some of their work at a few of our Canadian banks. I would highlight in my research here, I did a little bit of research, they became the first RegTech firm globally to achieve an ISO standard, the 42001 certification. I'm getting it right?
That's right,
Yeah. Which is specifically for enterprise-wide AI governance. So underscoring this firm's commitment to transparency, operational discipline in the deployment of AI. The certification itself, it mandates bias mitigation, resilience and controls across the entire AI lifecycle. So kudos to the team at Corlytics for that. I will now turn it over, I guess, Rory, you're coming in here.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. Freddie, you're good?
All good.
All right, thank you, fellas.
Thanks. Great. And really glad to be one of the sponsors of today's event. So as Paul has already done a good introduction of who we are, we'll maybe jump straight into the case study. But maybe before doing that, just a few more points on Corlytics. So Corlytics was founded in 2013 by our CEO, John Byrne, and his vision was to take a risk-based approach to regulatory change management and compliance. Let's fast forward to now. We serve 15 of the top 50 global banks, as well as insurers, asset managers, payments, and fintech providers. And we're also recognized by all of the key analysts as either a quadrant or category leader. So we have around 11 core integrated products in our platform, and that covers everything from regulatory change management as well as non-financial risk change management and transformation. And so that could be everything from horizon scanning, managing your laws, rules, and regulations, mapping regulations or obligations to policies, procedures, and controls, as well as managing and maintaining your internal control framework. And I won't repeat what Paul already mentioned. We are proud of having the ISO 42001 certification. And why is that important? Well, we're managing thousands of regulatory sources for our clients in conjunction with their internal control framework. So it's very important when using all of our AI capabilities that your data is secure, compliant, and safe. We're private equity backed, so we're backed by a PE firm called Verdane, and that's afforded us to carry out two strategic acquisitions recently, the most recent one being Deloitte RegHub. We've rebranded it as Corlytics RegRight. That's retaining both their consultants to provide on-hand domain expertise, as well as the acquisition of ClauseMatch, which is used by many of the banks here for their enterprise policy management capability. So that's enough talking about Corlytics. We'll probably now move into the more interesting part, which is one of our case studies. So we've put together, maybe over the next 12 minutes, a presentation and a demonstration which covers how we've supported one of our most strategic clients, a tier 1 bank headquartered in North America. And we started working with them a couple of years ago to support a 5-year transformation program across risk, compliance, and their control office. And so just going to go through some of the problem statements, and then I'll hand over to Rory to cover off how we have provided a number of solutions to meet these problem statements, as well as a demonstration on exactly how we've applied not only our software, our data, and our AI capabilities to meet those. So the first problem statement is around a lack of visibility and transparency. Answering the problem statement, how can we gain a real-time visibility into our regulatory footprint, our compliance status, and our regulatory risk profile? So some of the key metrics around this problem statement is, how do we turn noise into relevancy? How do we take multiple regulatory feeds and turn it into enriched information that actually is meaningful for regions, business lines, and different corporate functions? The second problem statement, disjointed and siloed processes. Having a combination of different data feeds, different GRC systems that all sit within the same organization, as well as other different tools. How do we bring that together to streamline regulatory change and non-financial risk processes? The third one is around a lack of AI and automation. So how do we turn manual, static spreadsheet processes into dynamic, streamlined workflow and AI-enabled processes? The fourth, decentralized repositories. So this leans into the same piece around systems being disjointed, but information being disjointed. There's an ongoing need for single source of truth with both your external regulatory environment, your regulations, obligations, and requirements, and your internal risk environment, your policies, procedures, standards, and controls. And then finally, bringing it all together. And I think if there's going to be one problem statement that really leans into Rory's demonstration today, and something that we really pride ourselves on, is around traceability and connectivity. Being able to pull large volumes of regulations together, identifying the most applicable obligations, taking those requirements or obligations and being able to use AI to map them to your internal policies, risks, controls, and products. So maybe over to you, Rory.
Yeah, thanks, Freddie. And I think that's a good segue into this next slide, which really points to the overall solution that we provided, not just the North American client that Freddie was talking about in the case study, but among other clients around across financial services, your insurance firms, including your banks, as well as, say, your payment providers and crypto providers as well. And it's really that left to right approach that we'll not just discuss going through this slide now, but we'll also demonstrate in the platform today as well. And really, it was in a partnership approach with Corlytics that the institution was able to implement what we call an AI-driven regulatory intelligence framework. Before we engaged with the client themselves, we asked some of their executive leaders what keeps them awake at night. And some of the key questions they asked were, what are the key regulations that we need to comply with? How many are there? And of all of those regulations, what are the key requirements, those key obligations within the regulations that they need to focus on? Aside from that, they then didn't know or wanted to know who owned those regulations, who owned the requirements, and most importantly, where were the gaps? And what we mean by gaps is, yes, they may understand the regulations, the laws, the rules that they need to comply with, but on that right-hand side, what were their policies, what were their standards, controls, procedures that actually aligned and mapped to those obligations as well? So this diagram here just paints that picture. On the left-hand side, what we were able to do was help the organization understand and track the key regulators, industry bodies, government agencies that they needed to comply with, first of all at a North American level, and then expanded at a global level as well. We then took that regulatory noise that Freddie talked about, that fire hose of information, and streamlined it down to only the key regulations, the key requirements that they needed to follow. What this then presented to them with was what we call a regulatory library, an inventory of all of the key laws, rules, and regulations that they need to comply with. The next step in that process is once you have that library in place, it's not enough where you then have thousands and thousands of pages of regulatory text that you need to understand. We then applied our AI to extract key requirements and key obligations from that text. And what this means is rather than their team of users in different countries, different jurisdictions, different teams, scrolling through pages and pages of regulatory text, we used our AI to extract the key requirements directly related to the organization and the entities within that organization as well. In the market today, there's a number of wide variety of vendors that can do just this. But really a unique identifier within Corlytics is that on the left, you have this library, and then we've combined this with our policy management and control management tools. What this then means is you have that end-to-end journey. You have the regulations and the key requirements that you need to comply with, and on the right-hand side, you have an AI-enabled gap analysis being able to take your internal policies, your internal controls, standards and procedures, and then map them to the requirements. A lot of this is done by AI technology, but we're also a big believer in that human-in-the-loop element. So whilst AI can take a lot of the grunt work and helping users to understand the regs, the laws, the rules, and then that mapping of policies and controls, the users and the teams then have to come in and actually validate and verify what we're suggesting to the users as well. This won't be the first time, and I do apologize. You will hear AI in this case study, probably in the next one, in every panel that comes after this, but it is a key enabler of a lot of what we're doing within regulatory change management at the moment. Within Corlytics, we have what we call an ensemble of AI techniques, including NLP, your natural language processing, your machine learning, deep learning, all of which come together across these 6 enabled results and outcomes that largely helped not just the organization in the case study today, but across many of our clients that we serve. I'll not read through these in detail now because they will come to life, but what we do have are 6 areas across classification. This is where we're able to take those thousands and thousands of regulatory documents and classify them with the related regulatory risk categories. Are they related to financial crime, market conduct, cybersecurity? We're then able to take those documents and summarize them. So rather than you reading through every piece of text, you can quickly understand if they're meaningful, if they're relevant and applicable. And then what we move on to is more that right-hand side, where if a document is applicable, we pull out and extract those key requirements, those key pieces of text that you need to comply with. And then we look at the policies, the standards, the risks and controls. We rationalize those that are applicable for those requirements of the regulations, and we then help suggest mappings of your policies, of your controls to those regulatory obligations and those regulatory requirements as well. So we have those 6 techniques or those 6 outcomes using our AI capabilities to help our clients and our organizations that we serve to solve those problems, all backed by, as I mentioned, that human-in-the-loop capability as well. I'll just exit from the slide deck here for a second and just jump in right away to the Corlytics platform. Appreciate we've only got a few moments or a few minutes left here, so we'll keep this very quick. But really within the platform, describing that case study from our North American client, the first area is our dashboard screen, which is configurable for the type of user. If you're your everyday standard user logging in, we have a Here's Your Day widget showing as a user, what do I have to do today, this week, this month, related to those regulatory changes I'm in charge of. And then we also have your more global view from a CCO's perspective, showing as a executive level manager what regulations are in my library, what are the obligations or key requirements, and what are my policies and controls, either mapped or unmapped, to those regulations. In terms of that library that we spoke of, this is just an example of a library in Corlytics for one of our sample clients, particularly related to that North American case study, where you can see very quickly that high-level overview of here's the regulations I need to comply with as a list, but more importantly, from a dashboard perspective, how many regulations have been marked as out of scope, rejected, where are the actions required, and more importantly, this donut chart on the right-hand side, where are my gaps in this process. In terms of into the nitty-gritty detail of what a regulation looks like within Corlytics, we mentioned extracting those key obligations, those key requirements. So what you're seeing here is that left to right view. On the left, you have obligations, so those key requirements, those key citations, those key pieces of text within the regulation that you need to comply with, automatically extracted for your review. In this middle section, you have what we call the gaps, where we take the organization's internal policies, standards, controls, and then show if something is a partial match or a strong match to the obligation or the requirement. And then finally, and probably the most important part in this whole process, is on the right-hand side, where we perform an AI gap analysis. We give you an understanding of what this policy or control addresses within the obligation or the requirement, the assessment of what that obligation means, how to interpret the obligation, and then finally, the key relevant sections of your policy, of your standard, or your process that actually align and map to that obligation as well. What you're then left with is that complete end-to-end view. You have your library of all the regulations you need to comply with, and then you have this management of each regulation showing the obligations, showing the potential mappings, and then an AI analysis of the situation as well. I know we only have 2 minutes left here, so the last thing I'll show you is one of the key pain points that Freddie mentioned here is not just the regulations that you need to comply with and understanding the sheer volume of those, but what's most relevant and what's a key priority for you as a firm. And so one thing we worked on very closely with this North American client was using what we call our risk enforcement data. We were able to look at every enforcement across the globe, categorize that by the regulation themselves, and then by looking at the financial impact, so the value amounts of all of those enforcements and violations that came in directly related to the regulation, how often they're occurring, we were able to generate these baseline risk scores. The reason I'm showing you this is because this is a really good indicator to help an organization understand what are the most important regulations or laws or rules. So they can quickly come in here, they can look at this and directly see not just each regulation, but the key sections of those regulations and the related risk scores that we generate to them as well. And the firm are also able to apply their own risk ratings alongside ours as well. I'll just finish there. Thank you very much for your attention and to the CRTA for allowing the opportunity here. And this is just a workflow to help track all of your users and what they need to do on the platform as well. Thank you very much.